Forgotten Heroes Vietnam is an important game in the wargaming scene of the last decade because this is the game that started the lock and load system, a system for tactical combat at the squad level. The system has been highly successful. There are many games based on this system, so in a certain way this game is a modern classic, and now we have a second edition for those of us that missed the game the first time that the game came out, or maybe for those who already own a copy of the old game and they want to have an upgraded edition with beautifully drawn maps and components. The game is set in the Vietnam War, as the title says, and I was really excited to play this game because last year I enjoyed another lock and load game, another game in the lock and load system, A Day of Heroes, and I really wanted to see how the system would work in the Vietnam War. In this review, I'm not going to tell you about the lock and load system in general. It is not a system that is too hard to learn, maybe not an entryway system, but on the other hand, if you have any familiarity with wargaming, I don't think it is going to be hard for you to pick up the system in case you do not know it yet. But if I were to explain the system in any detail, it would make this review too long and probably too pedantic. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to tell you about some of the specific aspects of this game of Forgotten Heroes Vietnam. I'm going to show you some of the scenarios that I played, and then at the end I'm going to share my general impressions about the game with you. Let's have a look at what's in the box, not because I want to give you a general components overview, but because I want to use the components as a starting point to tell a little bit about the game. Here you have skill cards that may be assigned to individual characters. A skill card will modify the abilities of the character, and of course that means that from game to game assigning different cards to different characters will modify the situation and will increase the replay value of the game. Counters, a lot of counters, very nice quality, very nice lock and load style of illustration on the counters. Unfortunately, I had to store my counters in a series of baggies, which is not ideal to me. I prefer to use counter trays, but here the box does not allow me to store a counter tray there, especially because of the maps, so I have to use baggies instead. Nice, and then we have 5 super nice looking mounted maps. I do not have the time to show them all to you, but trust me, they're good, and you will see some of them in the later phase, in the later part of this video. Player aid card, very nicely done. All that you need to know really, with the terrain effects chart on one side and some relevant tables on the other side, which also means that unless you make a large photocopy, you will have to flip the player aid back and forth as you're playing the game. Scenario cards, oh, look how many you have. Each of these cards represents a scenario, a different game that you can play using the rules and the components that you find in this box, and there are just so many, and they're very different from one another, very different types of experiences that you can have from scenario to scenario. Look, they keep coming, they keep coming. Yeah, that's a lot of scenarios, and of course a lot of gaming that you can get out of those scenarios. The rules for the system, pretty much the same rule book that I had seen in Day of Heroes, and then we have the module rules. Let me show you some of these rules that explain what happens here specifically, what is different here from the main system. You have some designer notes here about the creation of the system, how the game and the system came to be. And then we have some notes about specific units. Very interesting units are the Vietcong units. Of course, they have advantages in terms of movement and defense when they are in jungle hexes. No surprises there, but a very important factor is here. The very important ability that they have is ambush. When a Vietcong unit or stack of units makes a melee assault upon a unit that did not have line of sight to it at the beginning of the Vietcong unit symbols, in other words, if they jump at you from a spot that you were not keeping an eye on, Then the Vietcong's firepower is tripled. Yes, tripled for the first round of melee. That is not enough. Yeah, there is more and there is worse. Additionally, this first round is considered non-simultaneous, and eliminated opponents are immediately removed from play. Ouch. Yes, ouch. They may not have a very good firepower. They may not be able to sustain a long fight when, again, firepower is the main factor. But if they manage to jump at you, they can inflict a lot of damage. They will hurt you. Scenario D Village, which is played on a single map. Here you see the initial setup with a small group of ARVN units, which are basically besieged by a larger group of Vietcong units. The Vietcong units can set up anywhere on or east of this row of axes here, as long as they are no closer than 2 axes from the closest ARVN unit, so you can scatter them around a little bit. There are a lot of such units, and they even have a foxhole and a bunker that they can use for defense, so they definitely are in an advantageous position, and they will try to inflict as much damage as possible on that small group of enemy units. Also because starting from turn 2, the ARVN player is going to receive reinforcements, so things may change then. In turn 2, the ARVN player receives 2 vehicles, 3 multi-man units, 3 weapons, and a leader that actually comes with a veteran card. That makes him even better than he would usually be. So when these units start pushing this direction, things of course will become more problematic for the Vietcong player. And I must say that in this scenario, victory conditions really help in creating a nice narrative situation, a nice narrative flow. In fact, the ARVN player will gain victory points by eliminating enemy units. The Vietcong player also gains points by eliminating enemy units, and that is obvious, but then that number of points will be multiplied by the number of Vietcong units that are exited from this edge here. That means you destroy a lot of people, but you exit 0 units, then whatever number of points you had multiplied by 0 becomes 0, if my math teacher didn't lie to me back then. Of course, the more units leave, the harder it is to eliminate enemy units. So, very interesting decision here. This scenario is called Unexpected Visitors, and it pits the North Vietnamese army defending this area against the American army. The American army will be entering the map from this edge here. In turn 1, I already placed the units on the board just to give you a sense of the attack. This, at first glance, is a typical traditional attacker-defender situation. The North Vietnamese player is trying to defend this area. The game lasts 12 turns, at the end of which you count victory points, which will be based on occupation of that building and on elimination of enemy units. But this scenario is much more vibrant and unpredictable than that. And it is so thanks to the event markers that you place on the board at the beginning of the game as per scenario instructions. Event markers may have occupation written on them or line of sight. That indicates how the event is triggered by the US player. It is only the US player that triggers the events by occupying the area of the event marker or by getting line of sight to the event marker. When an event marker is activated, you look at the instructions on the scenario card that will tell you what to do. For example, suppose we activate event marker A, then we read paragraph 1. What is that? Well, we look at the back of the scenario card where we have the paragraphs that indicate what the events are, what the events corresponding to event markers are, what is going to happen in other words. But I'm not going to show that to you. As the instructions tell us here, we should not read ahead. We should read the paragraphs only when instructed to do so by the scenario. That means that these event markers will generate, well, surprising events, things that you did not foresee when you started playing the scenario, which is great. It just makes the scenario so much livelier, so much intense. It really gives you the sense of the ever-changing and very fluid situation in the battlefield. You start by having a general sense of what you want to do and how to do it, and that's all great, but the game really does not feel like a puzzle because the situation changes, new things happen. Again, I cannot tell you what that happens, but suffice to say that the events will present interesting challenges. They may offer the players new ways to score victory points, so they may modify the strategy of the two players drastically. It is really a lot of fun. Again, it could be a traditional scenario, but thanks to those events, it really shines. It really becomes something special. And if you're afraid about replay value, do not worry, because true, the first time that you play the scenario, you will have a total surprise. You really do not expect what the events can create, can generate. But when you activate an event marker, you still have to roll dice to really define how the event is going to take place, maybe where the event is really going to take place, and other things that will change from game to game depending on how you roll the dice. That means that after the first game, you will have a general sense of what the event markers can do, but trust me, the die roll that you have to roll when you activate the event marker can still change the significance, the effect of the event marker dramatically. Let's have a look at the scenario that is more armor heavy. This scenario is called the Tread Hats. It is played on 3 maps that are positioned in this interesting layout. The American player has 6 vehicles and several units that must be placed inside or on top of the vehicles. Those vehicles will enter that road in turn 1. I already placed them on the board so you can get a better sense of how things work, and they will have to follow this road for a period of time, trying to exit the map from that hex there. In fact, those vehicles form a convoy in order to simulate that there are specific restrictions that the American player has to follow at the beginning of the game. Those vehicles must follow the road. That's a pretty restricting thing. Also, they must move no more than 6 axes per turn, and they cannot change the position that they have within the convoy. They have to keep the order in which they enter the board. The American player must follow such restrictions until the North Vietnamese units fire on the convoy, or until the North Vietnamese units find themselves adjacent to the convoy. The North Vietnamese units can be placed anywhere on the board, so it is really up to the North Vietnamese player to find the best possible location to set up the trap, and setting up the trap well and executing the trap well is absolutely crucial, because yes, these units have a sniper, there is a leader, they have some weapons, but their most powerful weapon really is surprise. Once they lose the advantage of surprise, the American units can overpower them. It is really not too hard for the American units to do so. And in order to ensure that these units have the surprise factor, there is also another rule that says that the American player cannot try to spot them. That means that they can be spotted only if they place themselves in a situation where they are spotted automatically. For example, if they are in open terrain or if they fire on the enemy. So they really have the advantage of, well, being able to wait until the right moment to attack the convoy, and they really must do a lot of damage during that initial surprise attack. In this game, I found the same things that I enjoyed in A Day of Heroes. First and foremost, probably a strong cinematographic feel, almost as if I were immersed not in a war situation, but in a movie about a war situation, in an action movie. Just so intense is the interaction between the units, just so fast-paced is the action, that I really felt almost like I was seeing the cut of the movie with different characters interacting to create a continuous sense of action, a continuous series of exciting events, and all that was great. I like the interaction, as I said, between the different sides of the fight, and the fact that with the spotting system, more and more units will sort of like reveal themselves, and as they act, they also expose themselves to danger, and they will become possible targets for the opponent, and that happens gradually as a turn progresses. But I also like the interaction between different parts of the same side, meaning between infantry and armor, or infantry and helicopters, general troops and specific individuals with specific abilities. All of these things are really great, and they really create an organic situation in which you have to take into account all that all parts of your side can do. I enjoy the level of detail that you have when it comes to ordnance and specific weapons and specific individuals and vehicles and armor. It is a level of detail that really creates a strong sense of theme without rising to the level of feeling fiddly. So just that exact amount of detail that makes things fun and does not get in the way of enjoyment. So I cannot really think of anything negative to say about this game. This is a game that I really enjoyed from the point of view of how the rules work, how the scenarios are set up, the experiences that the scenarios can create, the number of scenarios, the quality of the components, everything is just top notch. If you have any interest in tactical wargaming, or if you already know the lock and load system and you want to add a game to your collection, I really think you should pick up this game. This is a game that I highly recommend.